Hello everybody, my name is Feike Hacquebord, and in the coming 30 minutes or so, I will talk about a cyber mercenary. In particular, I will talk about how we attributed campaigns to this cyber mercenary. This cyber mercenary might be a bit different than the ones you have heard about before. This cyber mercenary doesn't have a shiny office, nor does it have a nice brochure where it advertises its services. As far as we know, this cyber mercenary is not involved in any lawsuits against people who try to shine a light on their activities. In fact, this cyber mercenary is quite open about its activities, namely hacking into email boxes for money, hacking into social media accounts, and selling private data like phone call records, including cell tower locations and banking data and airline passenger data, for example. Let's now imagine a journalist somewhere on the world. This journalist has been publishing quite revealing stories together with renowned media outlets like BBC and CNN. As you can see from the headlines, this journalist is reporting on quite important things about life and death sometimes. You could expect that this journalist is a frequent target of APT actors. Now imagine that on one day his wife, who is a medical scientist, receives phishing emails. First on one day and the next on the second day. That second phishing email is about a court order. She has to appear in court, and just to prepare for that, she has to fill in some forms. On the third day, she receives another phishing email, and so on and so on. In total, a dozen or so phishing emails. Now, it would be almost natural to think she might not be the real target of these phishing emails. Maybe the attacker wants to target the journalist instead. And that would not be the first time that this happens. For example, the Associated Press journalist Raphael Sutter reported in 2018 about Pawnstorm, also known as Fancy Bear, that posed at IS and sent email threats to the wives of soldiers of the US Army. Then the actual target was probably the US Army and not the partners of people working for the US Army. Actually, the journalist has been a frequent target of Pawnstorm or Fancy Bear as well. We know that because we have investigated Pawnstorm for a long time, since 2014. So our initial thought was, when the journalist sent us a copy of those phishing emails, that this was the work of Pawnstorm again. We extracted the indicators, we looked at the emails, and we thought, well, this doesn't really look like Pawnstorm. As I said, we have been researching Pawnstorm since, well, at least 7 years. We have actually collected a big set of emails that were sent by Pawnstorm. So we have some knowledge about what they do and what they don't do. Of course, this is not a guarantee that this is not Pawnstorm. We might have missed something. We certainly have missed things, and they might have changed their mode of operation. So we started with this set of indicators, and the journalist wanted to know who did it, who was behind this. That is what we will answer during this talk. So we started with this set of indicators. It's just a few indicators, and we used methods to extend to a bigger set of indicators. We use passive DNS for that, and unique patterns in passive DNS, for example, historic WHOIS data, and historic internet scan data, for example, SSL certificates, but also SSH keys. And when we started to pivot from the original indicators, the indicators really exploded in our face. And those indicators will explode in your face as well when you look at this slide. We found more than 4,000 indicators, starting from, well, just a handful of indicators we extracted from the phishing emails. And we looked for interesting indicators in this big set. Well, this baby is the least interesting indicator. It's just a general phishing host name, actually, that could be used to target anyone. But then the next one, it resembles the email server of a business aviation company. So perhaps are these actors that belong to this intrusion set, are they perhaps attacking business aviation companies? Then also we saw something that looked like the email server of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs of a neighboring country of Russia. So are we actually talking about the APT actor perhaps that is attacking Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Then we saw this indicator mail-support.info. This indicator was reported on earlier, namely in serious incidents that apparently happened in Uzbekistan. Both Deflect Labs and Amnesty International reported on these incidents, and they released a lot of indicators, and some of those indicators we found in our 4,000 indicators. So did these phishing emails that were sent to the partner of the journalist have something to do with these incidents in Uzbekistan, perhaps? So this is our current status of our research. We started with a dozen or so phishing emails from the partner of a journalist. We expanded to a huge intrusion set, and we have the feeling that there are different kinds of targets here. So also because we have a new intrusion set, we don't really know the actor yet. So we want to have a name for this intrusion set, and we picked the name Void Balaur. And we thought this is a good fit because Balaur is a multi-headed monster in Eastern European folklore. We thought that is really a good fit because it indicates the diversity of the targets that are related to this intrusion set. So we actually didn't mention one very interesting indicator in this huge set of 4,000 indicators, and that is rockethack.me. Rockethack.me was hosting a website of a hacker for hire, actually. So we think the Void Balaur intrusion set actually belongs to RocketHack. This is the website of RocketHack as it was until the end of last year. It's now no longer on the internet, and it showed some business offerings on its website. It offers to hack into email boxes, as you can see here, but also some other services like flooding phones, but mostly in Russia and neighboring regions, and DDoS attacks as well. The RocketHack is advertising in underground forums like Probiv, and it has been doing that since 2018. We see that the feedback of other users in the underground forums is quite positive, actually. So this probably means that the business offering is real. Here you see some prices of the email hacking. You see that some email hacking is quite expensive, actually. And also that Void Balaur, so we call RocketHack Void Balaur from now on, is offering to hack into email boxes with interaction, with user interaction, and in some cases without user interaction. That is quite interesting. Later on, Void Balaur also published or advertised all the services in underground forums. and that includes cell tower data, so phone records with cell tower data, and SMS messages, so they can intercept SMS messages for you. That's only in Russia, by the way. So those are really private data, for sure. Also, all the private data is being offered, like airline passenger data, border control data, passport data, banking data as well. Void Balaur had a motto on their website. They had several mottos, but one of them was as follows: money is not the main thing on the free internet. The main thing is the power that belongs to the one who controls the flow of information. We actually think that this motto is quite a good fit for the business offerings of Void Balaur. So now the current status of our research is we retrieved a big intrusion set. We matched it actually with our own feedback data, and we found targets in our feedback data. Some targets were quite interesting, and we could follow the actor a bit. We found new IP addresses, new things they did, but it looked like a quite active group, but we were not really satisfied with this kind of research because, it was not that interesting right now. It was potentially interesting, but we lacked the data. So we had to wait and wait a long time. Of course, I did something else during that time. I was not just waiting for results to come, but I had to wait 6 months, and then we got lucky. In October last year, somebody used the Ilios VPN network. That's a bit of a shady a VPN network, to access a panel to send emails on behalf of Void Balaur, so those phishing emails, and a panel to access or delete targets from a list, and also to access log files. We could also access those panels and those access log files. There was no authentication needed. Then a few months later, we were lucky again. Somebody, we don't know whom, somebody was using a customer device to send emails, to add targets, to verify some phishing URLs, and to access log files. That was quite interesting. So you see on the slide one of the examples of those log files. So we had access to that information as well. And now we were in a much better position because now we had enhanced monitoring. We could monitor Void Balaur starting from October last year till actually now. We could view access log files. We could look into old and new campaigns of Void Balaur, and we could see the sender email addresses of the phishing emails. And most importantly, we could also match the data we were downloading from the panels and the log files from Void Balaur with our own feedback data. So we could see that some of the attacks of Void Balaur were really happening in our feedback data. And we found, more than 3,000 targets all over the world. Most of the targets are actually in Russia and the Ukraine and neighboring regions. But there are also targets in Western Europe, in Israel, in India, in New Zealand, in North Africa, many other places as well. And some of the targets are quite noteworthy. For example, people working for governments and for political parties, journalists, of course, human rights activists, naturally, and lots of CEOs, CTOs, CFOs of mainly Russian companies, but also companies in other areas in the world, and engineers working for phone companies, so key engineers who would have really a good knowledge of the inner working of the networks of the phone companies. Also ATM and point of sale resellers, and lots of IVF doctors, at least 50 of them, maybe more, and medical scientists. So lots of interesting targets. Now I want to go back to the Uzbekistan incidents. As I told you already, there was an overlap between the indicators that were published by the Amnesty International report and the Deflect report with the indicators we found, the 4,000 indicators we had. So there was an overlap. But there's also an overlap in targeting. So the targets that were reported in the reports of Amnesty International and Deflect, we also found them to be targeted by Void Balaur last year. So we think that Void Balaur was at least partially responsible for the attacks that were reported by Amnesty International in Uzbekistan. And that shows that this cyber mercenary is related to serious offenses against cyber activists or human rights activists and reporters from Uzbekistan. But there are also political targets, for example, in Western Europe, like in this example, in France, Italy, and Norway. That happened around the same time. They were targeted on the same day, except for one that was targeted a bit later. So this is also a campaign that lasted at least 1 month, apparently. And targeting in the Belarus, that is also quite significant because at least 2 candidates for the presidential elections were targeted by Void Balaur, and also one of the opposition party. Some of these people, they went abroad, they went into exile. I'm not saying that Void Balaur had anything to do with that, but they were there, they were attacking those people, and at least one of them went into exile. So then I was wondering, is there actually an overlap with Pawnstorm? As you remember, the journalist I was talking about in the first minute, he was a frequent target of Pawnstorm, also known as Fancy Bear. So I was wondering, what is the overlap between Void Balaur and Pawnstorm? Well, there's some exact overlap, and some overlap that is just more like the targeting, which sectors are being attacked by Void Balaur and Pawnstorm. The exact overlap you can see over here, especially a group of religious leaders that were targeted by Pawnstorm in 2014 and 2016. They were targeted by Void Balaur as well last year and this year, and that expands to 11 targets, but the overlap is only 5. And some people working for the Ukrainian government, there's also an overlap. And some reporters, there's an overlap as well. But there are some differences as well, as you can see over here. Pawnstorm is, for example, attacking armed forces a lot. And we didn't really see that Void Balaur is doing that. We saw Void Balaur targeting one minister of defense in a Eastern European country, but not really armies or armed forces. Also, Void Balaur is, for example, attacking phone companies in Russia, ATM resellers. We didn't really see Pawnstorm doing that. Also, IVF doctors. We didn't see that Pawnstorm is targeting those, but Void Balaur is doing that a lot. Still, you could view Void Balaur a bit like an APT actor because some of the campaigns are pretty long, as you can see over here. One of the richest persons in Russia, he is owning a lot of companies. And as you can see here, Void Balaur has been targeting people related to this person, his family members and his CEOs for a long time. It started, at least in our data, in September last year, and it's still going on. So that's already more than 1 year. So let's now talk and go back to the offering of Void Balaur that is related to private data. As I've told you, Void Balaur is offering phone data, including, for example, cell tower locations and airline passenger data and border control data, banking data, passport data. So this kind of data has been used by some journalists in their investigations. For example, some journalists have used airline data and phone records to allege a implication of a certain intelligence service to the attempted poisoning of Navalny in Russia. I'm not saying that they were buying this data from Void Balaur, but it is in the same kind of business as Void Balaur is. They actually said, the journalists said, that they were buying this data from different sellers that also posted on the same underground forum where Void Balaur is advertising. Again, I don't have any evidence that these journalists bought the data from Void Balaur. But Void Balaur got worried about the international attention for these articles. On the underground forum, they expressed concern and they were afraid that the Russian law enforcement would start to investigate how services like this could exist. I didn't see any slowdown of Void Balaur after this, so I think they were not really that impressed after all. Still, there's the question, how come that Void Balaur is able to sell really private data? So like cell tower data and other data, like SMS messages of people given a phone number. I don't know the reason for that. Some news articles have suggested that key engineers or law enforcement officers are being bribed. I don't have any evidence for that. I only have my own data. And in my own data, I see that Void Balaur has an interest in probably compromising key engineers working for phone companies. Also managers working for phone companies. So I've seen that several times. As you can see here on this slide, Void Balaur also targets Russian companies that sell equipment to phone companies. So there are all kinds of things possible that might explain why Void Balaur is able to sell this phone data. And there's actually a pattern here because I have been seeing the same for other sectors. Because Void Balaur is also attacking banks, especially fintech companies actually, and ATM and points of sale sellers. Also numerous IVF doctors who have a lot of private information, of course, and a couple of health insurance companies as well in Russia, and business aviation companies. So in their business offerings, Void Balaur says that for the airline passenger data, they lack information from business aviation companies. That might be a reason why they are actually targeting them, just to get more information to fill that gap. Now, I have a slide about the working hours of Void Balaur. As you can see, they are quite active. They have long working days. If they would be in Russia, and I don't know anything where they are located, but if they would be in Russia, they would start at 9 a.m. in the morning and they would work until late, till 10. So they have long working days. And actually work long working weeks as well. For example, as you can see here, they work from Sunday till Saturday, actually. So this is a bit different from Pawnstorm, for example, because Pawnstorm has long holidays in the beginning of the year and also during the summer, as far as we can tell. Some of their phishing campaigns just are not there during certain holidays. We don't see that for Void Balaur. So what are the defenses people can use to protect against actors like Void Balaur? Well, first of all, you have to use second factor authentication always for all of your accounts, of course. But do not use SMS for second factor authentication. Use an app or use YubiKey, for example. Use PGP always, and permanently delete messages you no longer need. There are some There are some apps like Signal that can do that for you. Turn off your devices when you don't need them. And there's one a bit painful thing, of course. You have to avoid certain email service providers in Russia. I don't want to name them here, but when Void Balaur is able to offer this service, like retrieving email boxes without user interaction, then there's something wrong with those providers. So maybe you should use a other email provider. Then is this enough? Well, I don't think this is really enough, because there are cyber mercenaries that can retrieve your private data. An example is Void Balaur. If things go wrong on the service provider side, there's not much you can do, only leaving that service provider and go somewhere else. But maybe people in Russia, they can't go anywhere else. As we all know, it is being alleged that companies like NSO are selling 0 days that can be used against your devices. And, well, you cannot really defend against that either. So one thing I would urge people to do is to go to your national lawmakers and tell them the following. They might view their local cyber mercenaries as a national asset, just like the weapon industry might be viewed as a national asset too. You can earn money simply by selling those weapons or cyber weapons to abroad. You could attack, of course, your adversaries abroad, or you could do something against drugs, etc. But the thing is that cyber weapons can fire back. If they get into the wrong hands, they can be used against your own citizens. And maybe it's time that we view the national cyber mercenaries no longer as a national asset, but actually as a threat to your own citizens. I hope you can use this advice. Thank you very much for your attention and thank you for your time. Bye-bye.